there are an increasing number of economists saying that we really should stop imports of Russian energy immediately.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Friday, March 25th. We could both say good morning and good afternoon. I'm Eric Planey.
I am Lucas Finko.
I'm David Wortmann. Hello, nice to meet you.
And thank you, David, for being here. And together, from Germany to the US of A, we are the pirates of CleanTech.
Yar. Yar.
Yar. It's a pretty nice name, actually, Pirates of CleanTech.
Yeah, it's a long story, but when we were thinking of this podcast, there's a American musical play called the Pirates of Penzance. And we were at first thinking about doing CleanTech ranting about all the negativity people against CleanTech. And so somehow Pirates of CleanTech came up from that. Anyways, Lucas, let me turn it over to you to introduce our very special guest about a very important topic that everybody has been asking us about of late.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, of course, today we have Mr. David Wortmann from Berlin in Germany. He's the CEO of DWR Eco. He also has two podcasts of his own called Let's Talk Change, which is kind of a macro political podcast, and Deep Dive CleanTech. I'm told they're both in German. Deep Dive CleanTech, also obviously about CleanTech like ours is. He's ex-First Solar. He helped them build their business in Germany. He's an entrepreneur. He has his own CleanTech consultancy. That's DWR Eco. They work with CleanTech consulting, entrepreneurs, investment consulting, communication policy and communications agency and policy advisory. So it's a pleasure to have David today, and we're hoping he can talk to us about the European energy situation. So welcome, David.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting time to meet up, and very excited about the topics we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and I'll say that we had waited a while from between our last podcast and this one, because obviously to talk about European energy security is very important for us. So we wanted to make sure that we had the right person, and we're happy to find you, David. It's amazing, just kind of a big picture commentary a little bit. I know European energy policy, and specifically German, has really migrated over the last 10 to 12 years. And it's amazing how we can talk about Europe and the USA, but a lot of it also stems from an event that took place in Japan in March of 2011, when the Fukushima tragedy took place, and Europe reacted by shuttering its nuclear and changing energy policy a little bit on the fly. While I think there was a logical rollout of clean energy, but it kind of disoriented everything. Is that how you see it a little bit, in terms of maybe energy policy wasn't as coordinated as it could have been because of that reaction? Or do you think things were just a little bit different, and now that's kind of impacting, obviously, events taking place tragically in Ukraine?
Well, I think we probably need to go back even further than 2011 to decide and to say that there would have been better to have different decisions. I mean, of course, this is all history, but I think it's still good to go back, because the decision, what we believe, to phase out nuclear energy was the right decision. There are many, many good reasons not to use nuclear. We may talk about it, I don't know. But the decision after Fukushima was basically a decision which was done, the second time, because we already had a decision in 2001, 2002, around that time, to phase out nuclear. But then we had a change of government, and then they decided, well, to phase in nuclear again. And then we had, after Fukushima, all of a sudden, the political consensus across Germany, across all parties, to phase out nuclear. So if we go a little bit more backwards, I think the main problem was that we depended ourselves too much on fossil energy imports. Most of the fossil energy imports, or most of the fossil energy use, is imported from other countries. And as a broader public has got to know now, the last couple of weeks, that the dependency on one country is in particular very, very high, and this is Russia. And alone Germany is depending on Russian gas of around 55%. And it's not just the gas, it's also oil of around 30%, and it's also coal. So we're using around 50% of our coal resources from Russia. So the dependency is very, very, very high. So the decisions made backwards to even increase the supply source from Russia, that was the main problem. We decided to build a new pipeline into Russia, which we called Nord Stream 2, and which was almost finished a couple of weeks ago. So I mean, it's basically finished, but it never got, but it was never put into practice, this pipeline. So the main problem we have had was, again, that we depended ourselves too much on foreign and in particular Russian fossil imports.
I think on the show we're pretty clear about no, energy source is perfect, right? Every source of energy or electricity has its pros and cons. So, I mean, we understand that it's obviously a difficult decision to make these decisions. They're not taken lightly, right? But I wonder if the equation has changed given the risks that you see now. Would that change the decision? If you could go back 20 years on nuclear, would that change the decision? Would you say, look, the risks of nuclear are lower than the risks that we're seeing now in Europe?
I mean, there are other risks tied to nuclear, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it that we don't have any uranium resources to run nuclear power plants. So we are depending 20-30% of our uranium resources also depend on Russia. So there's another fuel dependency. So it's not that easy that we are not depending on anybody. And we got, there is no uranium sources we could mine out of Germany to become independent. Okay. And obviously there are the risks around that, and this is what you see in the Ukraine right now. I think they have around 15 nuclear power plants, and there's a very, very high risk that some of these power plants could blow up. There would be a meltdown, another meltdown, because they're just not prepared for the case of a war. Right. Just like the nuclear power plants were not, in Fukushima in Japan, they were not prepared for the tsunami. So there are a lot of risks tied to that. Because there are these risks, there are really no insurers, at least not in Europe, somebody who would insure those power plants, because the insurance sum would be astronomically high, and therefore would make nuclear energy very, 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 very expensive. And if the private insurers are not there, who else can insure that? The public, right? The government. So at the end, you could only introduce and keep nuclear energy by public support, by government subsidies. And, and you don't have to do it if you have so many other choices. We hopefully will talk about it. Renewable energy. We have so many different renewable energy sources we could use, and we have been building up and using already in Europe and Germany already. So for me, it's not a question about whether we need nuclear or not. I think the decision has been made. And by the way, just to give you some figures, our dependency on Russia is probably something around, 1,000 terawatt hours, something like that. And the nuclear power plants, which we still have, by the way, in Germany, we still have 3 power plants which are running until the end of the year. They're only providing 30 terawatt hours. So it's a fraction of what we actually need to replace Russian energy. And by the way, that's the other point as well. Nuclear power is producing electricity, and we use gas for heating buildings, and this is where nuclear power, will not be of any help to replace Russian gas.
Well, I don't think Germany is a good solar resource either, but you probably have a good wind and good hydro in the south, right?
Well, I would say it's always a mix, right? And this probably is really, I think, across the globe. You could say there are, depending the time zones, depending the industry, depending the density of population, the density of industry itself, depending the latitude, there are so many different renewable energy sources which you could use, and everywhere at our globe, you could use them in a different configuration. So yeah, Germany doesn't have that as much of solar radiation as, let's say, the Sahara Desert, or southern Spain. but we don't need to have it. We have already a very high very high share of solar energy, which is working perfectly fine. And not just from a technical point of view, but also from an economical point of view. So taking all of these different sources in a combination, wind, solar, hydro, a little bit of biomass, even geothermal has having a comeback, then you get, of course, all these storage mechanisms, green hydrogen, demand side management. There's so much potential around that as well, energy efficiency. So taking all of that into consideration, you could run a country like Germany on 100% renewable energy. And it's not just because I say this, because there are so many studies out there modeling that, and it's basically the plan of Germany to do that. So it's already a public plan to do that.
So your answer segues very nicely into my next question, which was, this morning I saw, for example, negotiation between the U.S. and the EU is that the U.S. is going to increase LNG exports on a temporary basis to Europe as a stopgap measure, but also your point about Germany being able to go 100% renewable. I remember a couple of years ago, there were a couple of days in the year, I think in August, where Germany almost completely ran for that particular day on renewable sources. So we know it could happen. And I think that's why there's a lot of surprise in the clean tech community in America to hear about Nord Stream 2 and the dependency on Russian fossil fuel, because several years prior to that, there was a lot of enthusiasm over a country geographically located in Germany, similar to parts of the northern United States, that actually can run on renewables. So my question for you is, with everything that's happened over the last month in Russia and Ukraine, how has the German government effectively responded by saying, are we going to be coordinated in implementing, like you said, green hydrogen, a little bit more solar, wind energy? Has it been more coordinated, and has the political momentum come back to renewables in Germany?
Yeah, and it actually came back already before we had this geopolitical crisis with Russia. We had a change of government in September 2021, and then after negotiation, the new government was formed in December 2021 with the Social Democrats, the Liberal Party, which is sort of the free market party at our end, the so-called FDP, and the Greens. The Green Party actually took over a lot of the key ministries. So the Ministry of Economy and Climate Protection, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So the Greens have really driven within these negotiations, has driven the new government into a very green and pro-environmental and pro-renewable energy agenda. So they agreed already before the war that Germany would increase the renewable energy share substantially until 2030. For example, 200 gigawatt of photovoltaic in the next years, which is roughly something like 20 gigawatts, even slightly more a year, which should be implemented. Wind energy of more than 110, 120 gigawatt, offshore wind energy, green hydrogen, heating pumps. They have set up a objective to increase the renewable energy share of until 2030 in the renewable energy heating sector of 50%. But some of these things were now accelerated. First of all, they said, well, this is a very good, we are on the right track here because of this geopolitical challenges we have with Russia and the high dependency on fossil energies. This is what we need to do anyway, right? Not just because of climate protection, but a few things they have accelerated as well. So they decided, for example, today is Friday, our recording. They decided a couple of days ago, 2 days ago, that that there will be a ban of gas boilers by 2024. So you will not be able to implement any gas boilers into new buildings anymore. There will be a replacement mandate for all fossil fuel heating system older than 25 years. So if you have a gas boiler which is 26 years, you have to replace it. Also, it's not just Germany, right? Also at the European level, we will see a number of initiatives as well driving this, and we may talk a little bit more in detail later about it. But the driving force now from Europe is, and the intention is, to become totally independent of any Russian fossil energy imports by 2027. So there's a huge driver now to change the whole energy system. And this goes into the heating system, the building system, the electricity system. Germany just decided, for example, to have 100% carbon neutral electricity system by 2035. So not 2050, but 2035 already. And in terms of Germany, this means 100% renewable energy. So there has been this driver already by the change of government, but this now got accelerated. And I would even assume this will be accelerated even more if we look down the next couple of months, because you never know how Putin is going to react and may even make his own decision to cut out any exports to Europe.
Yeah.
This, if Lucas, if I could jump in, this almost reminds me of what we always talk about in the US being the great moonshot of the 1960s, where Kennedy bestowed in 1960-61 the mandate to put a man on the moon by 69, and we did it. And we've all talked about in America ad nauseum about having a moonshot effect and impact. And maybe if there's any good to come out of this horrible tragedy in Ukraine, is the fact that I think people are reawakening that we have the capability, we have the technology, now we need the political will to really kind of drive clean energy implementation forward. And what I get motivated about is, obviously Germany has such a reputation in the US as being technological leaders, so that if a product needs to be slightly improved for the future for implementation, German companies can do it. And I would think that's going to have a snowball effect for the rest of the Europe, like Central Europe, that's also relying on Russian gas, et cetera. Between both the German policy and also technology incubation, I think things are really going to look potentially more positive in the whole continent over the next 5 years. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a big opportunity as well. And it's, of course, unfortunate to say opportunity in this current context here. But I think external shocks, as we have seen with Fukushima, as we are seeing now with the war with Russia, this can stimulate and accelerate transformation. And these are very interesting times, these times of chaos, these times of unstructured uncertainties, because either you choose to jump on the agenda of old technologies, of all those trying to go back to solutions of the past. There are, for example, ideas out there to drill oil again in the North Sea, to drill for gas in Germany, because there are some resources, right? So either you choose to go down that way, or you use the opportunity and really go into the next era. You just do the next jump. And this is obviously from my point of view, not just my point of view, luckily, but a lot more people, and also in general from the government as well, at least part of the German government, is to say, well, let's jump into the new era of clean tech, and let's really boost renewable energy. Let's increase the implementation rate of solar and wind farms. Let's accelerate the implementation of heating pumps. Let's go back and revise options around geothermal and biogas. So there are many ways to do that, and in this status we are currently in. And you see that different forces currently fighting, and I only can hope that the clean energy and clean tech agenda will be dominant here.
Yeah, I mean, we're having the same discussions here too, right? So clean energy advocates are coming out saying, see, we need clean energy. And then oil and gas advocates are coming out and saying, see, we told you we should have drilled more, right? So we're having that same battle here. I have so many questions for you, David. This is crazy. So we had heard a rumor when after Fukushima that Germany went all in on solar, and it caused crazy price swings in German electricity markets. Was that true? And what are the learnings there?
No, I mean, as you have said it, that was not the case.
Okay.
So and it had nothing to do with Fukushima, right? Because when the decision was made in 2011, 2012, they didn't shut down any nuclear power plants, but they gradually faded them out over the years. And we still run on nuclear energy. We still have these 3 power plants, and we are now in the year of 2022, but they will be now shut down by the end of this year. But what we had was a very high installation rate of solar PV. And this was because there was such a high demand for people to implement their PV on their own roof, and there was a very good incentive as well for investors to build up solar power plants, free field installations. So we accelerated the implementation of solar energy, which was great, because if we had not done that, we would have had a much bigger problem now, to be honest. But for a few years, we had like 6, 7, 8 gigawatt of solar energy implemented in the market each year.
Cool.
But if we look back, I mean, this 7, 8 gigawatt seemed to be very huge back then. But if you look at what we are planning right now, we are planning at least 20 gigawatt a year. So this is like, I mean, not even half of that was installed in those peak years. If we go back and look back, we should have kept on going with 8, 9, and even increasing 10, 11, 12 gigawatt a year. If we had done that, we would not have the same issues as we have right now. But back then, the mechanism was mainly based on a feed-in tariff. So there was a fixed tariff you got. And of course, if there is like 8, 9 gigawatt of installment, somebody would need to pay the feed-in tariff, which is the ratepayer, which was distributed to everybody. So in general, the prices for electricity went up because of the EEG, this so-called feed-in tariff extra payment. And but the mechanism has changed since then, because large free field systems are are part of a tender, so you have to quote for that. And secondly, the rate of own self-consumption has increased substantially, meaning that there is no ratepayer actually affected from that, because you just produce it on your own. And there are houses, I don't know, you can do it 40, 50% of your own electricity you can produce on site on your own building. And of course, thirdly, the cost of solar really came down a lot substantially since then. And solar, this is recognized by the International Energy Agency in the meantime as well, is the lowest cost energy globally.
Yeah, and we're having all those same discussions. California is trying to kill their rich tariff for rooftop solar. Florida, I hear the governor's about to sign the bill any minute now. So yeah, we're having these discussions too. Such a rich tariff can't last forever. It has to go sometime. So we have to bite the bullet on that. All very interesting. All very interesting questions.
Yeah, I guess, David, just kind of what you were talking about in terms of all the importing both oil and gas from Russia. If is there any modeling out there that suggests what would be best for Germany to really focus on first to have the impact of eliminating as much usage? Is it a matter of converting homes to electricity for heat generation, or is it a matter of really going electric vehicle rollout to really reduce gasoline usage? Is there any priorities that have been spelled out? And if not, is that coming up in some sort of central, German planning in the near future?
I mean, we need to break down a little bit the numbers. And I already mentioned how depending we are on Russian energy. So it's around 50% gas dependency, around 50% coal, and around 30% of oil. These are numbers of last year. But the government has done a lot of extremely tremendous efforts they're doing currently. in order to lower that. The dependency on Russian oil was already, or as we speak, is decreased down to 25%, but it's still a high number. But the plan is to become independent of Russian oil by the end of the year. In terms of oil, it's a little bit easier than on gas, because oil you can buy at the global market. Oil is basically used as well for electricity production, so you can use an increasing rate of renewable energy for that, for example. It's also used in the, of course, in the transport and vehicle sector. So electric vehicles will play a big role, and sharing services, putting a lot more people into one car. So there are a lot of possibilities. But the aim is by the German government, which was just published today, is to become zero depending on Russian oil. So if we talk about coal, we have this high dependency of 50%, and the aim is to lower it in the next couple of weeks down to 25%, because a lot of coal power stations are still running on Russian coal. And towards the fall, September, October, November, the objective is also to have zero dependence on Russian coal. And coal also is a little bit easier than gas, because you can buy coal from other countries, Australia, Venezuela, Colombia. There are other sources which you could use, which doesn't make coal better, right? But there are other sources which you could use. But again, you can also replace coal by energy efficiency measurements, renewable energy, and these sort of things. So the biggest challenge is actually the gas dependency, and so because most of the gas is being used in the heating sector, it's not being used in the electricity sector. It's only roughly around 14% of the Russian gas is used for electricity production. So most of that it's really heating, and that makes it very, very difficult. So the objective here is, at least the official objective, as it was published today, is to become independent of Russian gas by mid of 2024. I believe that's too late, because, and we may talk a little bit about the climate crisis as well on a second note here. But also, I think we need to be prepared any day of the decision of the Russian government, of Putin. We need to be prepared that he is making the decision to stop the export into Europe or into Germany as well. And that's what the German government is actually doing. I mean, they're not talking about everything on public, right? Because this would also give them vulnerability. But again, it's much harder. So one of the ways is that Germany is increasing the import of LNG, liquefied gas, from the Middle East, from the United States. This will drive up global LNG prices, because you're not giving it away just for free or for the old prices. But I mean, an economy like Germany or like Europe will be able to cope with that. And if there are problems on the lower end of the income level, then of course the government would be able to lower prices for them, or to do some subsidies or these kind of things. So that's really not the problem on that end. There are an increasing number of economists saying that we really should stop imports of Russian energy immediately. So not really waiting until the end of the year, or waiting in terms of gas until 2024, something like that.
Wow.
And they say, yes, we would probably have an economic hit of 4%, maybe 5% of our economy. But, and this is what I also support, is if we have that hit, this is the price we should pay to stop this war, to stop this amazing war crimes which are going on. There are people dying here. This is our, from where I live right now to the Ukraine, it's closer than to Italy. And it's really right next door, where Russians are bombing theaters where are 300 kids hiding for bombs, and they know exactly there are kids inside, and they die. They are, shutting down whole cities. They leave the people in the city since 1 or 2 weeks now. They don't have any food and drinks anymore. People are dying because of starvation. I think all of this, and I'm just saying this in a very drastic way here, I think all of this should really be reason enough for us to say that it's worth it to take an economic hit. And by the way, this economic hit is probably not going to be higher than the economic hit which we had in the first year of the COVID pandemic. And we all survived. Of course, we all had problems. Businesses went down. It was terrible. But this is nothing against what those people are currently experiencing, and is not just what the people are, experiencing there in terms of death and getting injured and all of getting replaced. It's a huge migration going on internally and externally. 4 or 5 million people are half of the population is being displaced internally already or externally. But my last sentence on that is we need to defend our freedom as well. And if we are not going to stop these kind of behavior, this will continue, or the likelihood that this will continue is very high. So I think it's really worth it to have this economic hit. And so this is where we are right now.
Yeah, well said. And my father grew up 30 miles from the Ukraine border in Slovakia. Completely understand that perspective. And you're absolutely right. A 4% hit to the German economy is nothing compared to what millions of refugees are suffering with right now. And we have to stop the behavior that is driving these refugees to exist in the first place. So that's really, thank you. That's a great way to kind of end talking about geopolitics. David, because we were so focused on what's happening geopolitically, we didn't really ask you about your firm and DWR Eco. So why don't we, before we close out, why don't you talk a little bit about what you're currently doing in your current role?
Well, we set up DWR Eco in 2012 with the intention to have a consultancy and an agency out there which is only focusing on clean tech. Back then, to a certain extent, I think still even now, there are not many players out there who are 100% focusing on technologies and business models which will help us to combat the climate and the environmental crisis. There are a lot of players out there which are very neutral. They support gas, they support nuclear, they support this and that, maybe some solar, etc. But we decided right from the beginning, we are only going to put any effort and time into things which will help our environmental and climate crisis. And we are only going to work with those clients together who would have a solution. And I'm a strong believer that, of course, we need to change policies. We need to change the way how we live. We need to have, strong environmental groups fighting for that. We need the public speak up, like the Fridays for Future movement, Greta Thunberg, and many, many others. This is all important, and we need to address this. We need to have a behavior change, etc. But this all will not work if we don't have the technologies in place to do this, or if we have mechanisms and business models, or let's say consumer patterns ready in order to reach those objectives. And this is what we are doing. We are, first of all, we are helping companies to understand the regulatory and the policy environment. We help policymakers to make the right decision to create a leveling field for clean technologies, because very often this is not the case. If we think around solar and wind in the past, if we think around green hydrogen currently or electric vehicles, they don't have a leveling field. So we help to change those legislations and advise both companies and policymakers to do these changes. Our second thing we are doing is helping on the communication side, and helping companies to position their solutions in the market so that they get picked up. We help them to accelerate, to scale, and get the visibility in the market. So we are a full service communication agency, everything from social media, campaigning, product placement, etc., marketing, PR, press, journalism, and all of that. The third pillar we have is we are a strategic advisory. So we help particular investors and corporates to make the right decisions about their investments. So we help to put money into the right place, into the right startups, into the right segment. So we help those decision makers who have the money for investments to understand where are business opportunities out there, where are risks out there on the market side. So we try to get the money into the right place here. So this is the core what DWR Eco is doing. This is how we are earning our money. This is, and we see this basically not as a way of making money. Of course, we need to make money in order to pay our people, in order to pay our rent and everything what we have. But as I said a little bit earlier, for us, doing this is actually a way of helping to mitigate and combat climate change and the environmental crisis we are in. And because we are really impact driven, we are not only having this, let's say, for-profit activities, but we also do a lot of non-profit activities. We do studies, non-for-profit, how to run a country, how to run a community, a county, a state on 100% renewable energy. So we do these sort of, scientific study. We collect the money. We ask scientists to look at that, and the vehicle here is the Energy Watch Group. So it's a non-profit organization independently working on these sort of things. We are, and you mentioned this in our introduction, we are doing these podcasts. So we are providing a lot of content to educate the market, to educate policymakers, to educate journalists. So let's talk change. And also Deep Dive CleanTech is a podcast which are available everywhere. Most of them are in German. We have a few in English, but I think we will increase the English content as well. We also support business groups like the Leaders for Climate Action, which we have founded, which is an increasing big organization of startups, venture capital, and digital companies across Europe. More than, I think, 1,500 companies are inside who promised to become carbon neutral. So we try to use these forces as well in the industry independently of any regulation pressure. We are also, for example, now on Monday, we will have a German-US business roundtable where we will discuss topics around how to collaborate in the renewable energy space. And we do this under the umbrella and name Sun and Wind Belt, which we think it's a good impression to demonstrate that we have this huge belt. It's not a Bible belt, it's not a Rust Belt, but it's really this sun and wind belt from Europe over to the US, which could help us commonly to get independent from any fossil energy.
Oh, that's great. If you send us a link, we'll put it up with the podcast for that. If people can attend it.
Sure.
That sounds like great. And that's the level of cooperation we need to have. But the technology, the size of market, the scalability of our two countries and its impact on global markets is so significant. If we're not collaborating, because I've always said, in order for us to achieve our Paris Climate Accord goals, we have to be smart about allocation of capital. And we have to be most impactful for every dollar we spend, every euro we spend. And so these collaborations are fantastic. So it's really great to hear what you're doing. And we certainly want to support you any way we can.
Yeah, sure. We are really, looking into it is now to extend partnerships with the United States. You mentioned before, I have been working with First Solar in the past. We have a lot of US clients who are interested in Europe, but we also have clients who are interested in the US. And I think also, going through this common experience here of this big disappointment coming from Russia, because there has been a very big willingness as well to collaborate with Russian companies as well in the past. But I think we need to strengthen ties even more with our partners in Europe, with our partners in the United States, but of course as well in Asia. And so we as DWR Eco, we are going to have a lot more partnerships in the US going down the road. Yeah.
But this is great. And Lucas, I don't know if you have anything before we wrap up here, but this has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, this has been great. I guess just thank you, David, for coming on and illuminating us. I think you've given us kind of a view into how urgent this matter is, right? There's been some thinking that, climate change is so slow that there's no urgency, right? So now with this complexity in Europe, there's finally some urgency to climate change, right? So I think that'll be important for us.
Yeah, I mean, we got, to simplify it, we got one solution for at least two crises, and that's the energy and security crisis and the climate crisis.
Right.
And just a couple of weeks ago, we have had the latest report by the IPCC, by the World Climate Report, and it's alarming. The United Nations Secretary General, he said mankind is choking on fossil energy. So we are really messing that up currently. There are more and more places at our planet and our globe which are not habitable. People are migrating. We have still a growing population globally. So we really, really need to change things. So we need to get away of any CO2 emissions, and that's coal, that's gas, that's oil. We need to get away of that as quickly as possible.
Agreed.
Amen to that. So, David Wortmann, thank you so much for spending time with us. We hope to maybe in the future follow up with you and hear a little bit more, so our listeners can hear a little bit more, maybe a year from now, about the progress that has taken place, or even 6 months from now. That we would love to have you on again.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
Nice talking to you, and yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
We can reach out anytime. Thank you. Yeah.
And we're back. Lucas, I don't know about you, but that was the right guest at the right time with David. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to keep him on for another hour, but we couldn't keep him. I just have like 10 more questions for him. Right? So there's so much going on.
I think maybe this will be the title of our podcast for today, but I loved when he said one solution for two crises.
Yep.
And I think that crystallized everything right now. And we all needed the shot in the arm. Unfortunately, we don't want to have a tragedy taking place in Ukraine to be that shot in the arm. But the reality is everyone has woken up again. We can't rely on belligerent nation states to be the ones sending their natural resources. It's bad for the environment, and it's bad for geopolitical security. So we have to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, it has so many tentacles, right? And it has so many implications. Like I was going to ask him about geographic diversity, because here in the US, we're lucky we have deserts in the Southwest. We have rainy mountainous areas in the Northwest. We have, wind blown Great Plains in the middle of the country. Germany doesn't have that, right? So they're going to have to run transmission lines all over Europe, down to Spain and France. And so that'll reinforce kind of the European Union also. So yeah, there's so many different ways this can go and complexities that come out of this that we could just talk forever about this.
We don't have it to the extent the US does, but I remember that day in which Germany was producing 100% renewable energy for the grid. And it was because there was a lot of wind in the north off the North Sea, pushing the wind turbines, and it was an incredibly sunny day in the southern part of Germany, in Bavaria, etc., that all the solar was really firing on all cylinders as well. So they have enough that they can diversify in like little pockets, but not to the point of the U.S.
Yeah, and they have mountainous regions in the south, so they should be able to do hydro also. So yeah, I think they have it. I was going to ask them about land usage too, which we saw in the Princeton study. That might be an issue in Germany because there's not a lot of open land available in Europe. That's all I'll take.
I'll tell you though, years ago, when I think maybe it was 2012, I was flying into Germany to Munich. And, as you start getting those little village suburbs, I couldn't believe I saw rooftop solar on churches, on, government buildings, universities. So they do put a lot of rooftop solar up. So I think, maybe they'll want to have some concrete mason blocks to go with it. So
Definitely.
about that. But
Yeah.
Germany is making, Germany is the most efficient country in so many ways. So they're going to find ways to making sure they're utilizing land correctly and taking, ag and everything else into consideration. But I thought it was a great podcast. This was one of our best ones. And Lucas,
I love that he said too, like, maybe we should just drop all Russian energy imports immediately. I'm like, yeah, that's the kind of thinking I want to hear, right? Let's just drop all coal right now. Let's drop all natural gas right now.
Yeah, I didn't believe him when he first said it. I didn't think it's possible, but he made the case. We went through it during COVID, and you know what? The people of Ukraine deserve this type of hard action,
There you go.
hard decisiveness. When you see these children in hospitals in the Ukraine, what they're going through right now, they deserve better, and we deserve to step up. And we've done it to a certain extent, U.S. plus Western Europe. We could do better. We could do more.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, as you can probably tell, we're not doing articles today. I think our first episode ever, we're not doing articles, but we'll get back to that next week. This was great. And, thank you, Lucas, for putting such a great guest together for us. And I hope that people spread the word, and we'll get David's interview out as soon as we can.
Yeah, I hope this spurs some discussion and some talking among the industry and among the policymakers that we need to be thinking bigger and taking bold action, right? So
views and opinions expressed by Lucas and I are those of ourselves, not any organizations we are affiliated with. And any public company we talk about, we are not making a recommendation one way or the other about any underlying public securities that you may be able to purchase or sell. So please do your homework. Please consult with a registered investment professional, and don't listen to us for any advice that way.
And you can also find us on YouTube if you want to follow along the articles with us. You search for Pirates of CleanTech and you click subscribe, and then there's a little alarm bell, and that'll notify you when our latest video is out, which you want to get right away. You can also find us on your favorite podcast venue. Search for Pirates of CleanTech and you'll find us. I think a lot of people watch us on Apple Podcasts. We're on about a dozen podcast sites, so you can find us where you like to listen to podcasts.
Cool. Well, with that, I'm Eric Planey.
I am Lucas Finko.
And together we are the Pirates of CleanTech. Yar.
Yar.